The trouble started the day I installed a smart lock on the pool gate at my cabin. I didn't think a keyless entry system would cause a neighborhood meltdown, but then again, I hadn't counted on Lorraine Fairchild, the HOA president with a bob haircut, an obsession with bylaws, and a voice that could wake the dead. My name's Nolan Everett. I'm a contractor, 45, divorced, and I like things simple. I bought a modest cabin up in Timber Ridge quiet, tucked into the pines with a small private pool I'd refurbished myself. It was supposed to be my weekend escape from city noise and HOA nonsense, but Lorraine had other plans. "You can't just put technology on community property," she snapped, arms crossed, standing in front of my gate like she owned the forest. "It's not community property," I replied, holding up the deed. "This is my land. This pool is on my parcel, I pay for its maintenance." "You folks don't get a vote," her nostrils flared. "It violates aesthetic cohesion." "A what now?" Section 12, paragraph 3. "All modifications must be approved by the HOA board. It's a pool lock, Lorraine, not a Vegas light show." She stormed off, muttering something about taking this to the board. I didn't think much of it until the next Saturday, when I pulled up to the cabin and found some scrawny teenage guy fiddling with my gate. "Hey," I barked. "Can I help you?" The kid jerked back like I'd slapped him. "My mom said I could be here. I'm checking the lock." "Who's your mom?" He puffed out his chest. "Lorraine Fairchild. I'm Zayden." Of course he was. "Zayden, you're trespassing. This is private property." "I have a right to be here," he yelled, pulling out his phone. "You're threatening me." "I'm calling 911, I blinked. "Are you serious?" He was. He dialed, put it on speaker, and started spinning some tale about how I'd trapped him behind a locked gate and threatened his life. I just leaned against the fence, arms folded, and waited. When the deputies showed up, I calmly handed over my property survey, the permit for the lock, and security footage from the cabin's exterior camera showing Zayden hopping the fence. The officer turned to him. "Son, did you jump this gate?" Zayden stuttered. I was making sure it wasn't." "Illegal," the deputy looked unimpressed. "That's not how this works. Turn around." "What?" "You're under arrest for trespassing. You don't get to climb into someone's yard and call the cops when they catch you." As the cuffs clicked shut, Lorraine came screeching up the gravel drive in her Lexus, bright red and practically vibrating with rage. "You can't arrest my son," she screamed. "He was acting under HOA authority." The deputy didn't even flinch. "Ma'am, the HOA doesn't supersede state law." I watched her face crumble as Zayden got loaded into the cruiser. I could have said a lot. But I just looked at her and said, "Next time, try knocking." The following Friday, I came back up to Timber Ridge expecting a quiet night with a cold beer and a fire pit. What I found instead was a certified letter duct taped to my front door, flapping in the breeze like some kind of passive-aggressive flag. The HOA seal was stamped right across the top, and the signature at the bottom was unmistakably Lorraine's. Her handwriting looked like it had been carved with a scalpel. I peeled it off and read it standing on the porch. The letter stated that due to what they called unauthorized surveillance equipment and hazardous modifications to shared property, I was being fined $500 per week until the unlawful lock and associated technology was removed. There was a second envelope underneath it. This one was from the county. Lorraine had filed a complaint claiming I was running an unlicensed public pool. She'd submitted photos clearly taken from behind a tree on my property line showing the pool, the lock, and a zoomed-in shot of a sprinkler timer that she labeled unauthorized electrical installation. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was impressed. This was no longer petty. This was coordinated. She'd turned this into a campaign. The next morning, I drove straight to the county planning office. The clerk, a guy named Jeff with a mustache that looked older than me, pulled my file and frowned. "Looks like someone's been busy," he said, flipping through the stack. She filed a total of 4 complaints this week, one about improper fencing, one about noise violations, and one claiming you're operating a commercial facility without a license. I leaned on the counter. "You gonna investigate all that?" Jeff snorted. "We already did. Your permits are tight. You even filed the updated property line survey last year." She's grasping. That might have been enough for most people, but I'm not wired to let things slide when someone keeps pushing. I asked Jeff for copies of everything Lorraine had filed. I also requested the HOA's Articles of Incorporation from the county's Public Records Office. Took me half a day, but I found something interesting. The HOA's original charter had expired 8 years ago and hadn't been renewed. Back at the cabin, I started digging. Lorraine and her so-called board had been issuing fines, enforcing rules, and collecting dues for almost a decade without any legal authority. The HOA hadn't filed the required paperwork with the state since 2014, which meant they were acting under the appearance of legitimacy but had no legal power to enforce anything. I called a property attorney I'd worked with before. His name was Curtis, and he specialized in real estate fraud. "Yeah," Curtis said after looking over the documents I emailed. "This is bad, not for you, you're clean, but this HOA, they've been operating like a government without a license. If they've collected money during that time, that's civil fraud. Possibly criminal, depending on how they used it." He paused. "You want to go nuclear? I want them to stop harassing me, and I want every homeowner they've bullied to get their money back." Curtis laughed. "Then let's start with a motion to declare them illegitimate in civil court. That'll shut them down faster than a rattlesnake in a sleeping bag." I gave him the green light. That afternoon, I printed the expired charter, stapled it to the HOA letter Lorraine had taped to my door, and walked it over to her house. It was the first time I'd seen her since her son was hauled away in handcuffs. She answered the door in a silk blouse like she was expecting a magazine crew. "Back so soon," she said, voice dripping with fake sweetness. I handed her the packet. "You've been running a ghost HOA. No legal charter, no state filing, nothing. You're not a president, you're a fraud." Her face didn't move, but her eyes darted to the papers. "I'd suggest you stop issuing fines before someone presses charges," I said, "and you might want to call a lawyer. There's a class action about to land on your doorstep." She shut the door in my face. By the next morning, copies of the expired charter and Curtis's legal summary were in every mailbox in Timber Ridge. I included a note inviting homeowners to a meeting at my cabin that Saturday night. I expected 10 people. 37 showed up. We gathered around the fire pit, lawn chairs on gravel, beer coolers open, and people angry, not just annoyed. Furious. Turns out Lorraine had been fining people for everything from hanging wind chimes to using the wrong shade of mulch. 2 families had moved out just to escape the harassment. A retired firefighter named Joe stood up and said, "I've been paying dues for 12 years. If what Nolan's saying is true, I want every cent back." Curtis joined by speakerphone and walked everyone through the steps. "If you paid dues or fines in the past 8 years, you were misled. That's financial deception. Every letter she sent threatening legal action, that's mail fraud." The community voted on the spot to form a legal committee. I was nominated to head it. I didn't want the job. But I also didn't trust anyone else to do it right. The next week, we filed a civil suit against the individuals claiming to be the HOA board. Not the HOA entity, it didn't legally exist anymore, but the people behind it. We demanded restitution, transparency, and a full audit of all funds collected since 2014. That's when things got dirty. Someone dumped roofing nails across my driveway late one night. My truck's front tires were shredded by morning. I installed 2 more security cameras and posted the footage online. A blurry figure in a hoodie, but the gait and build looked a lot like Zayden. A few days later, I received a cease and desist from a lawyer representing Lorraine. They claimed I was defaming her and inciting harassment. Curtis responded with a letter of his own, attaching the expired charter and a copy of the fraud statute. Then came the break. An anonymous envelope showed up in my mailbox, no return address. No note, just a thick stack of photocopied checks. HOA payments made out to Timber Ridge Community Management, deposited into a personal account under the name Lorraine Fairchild. Curtis ran the account number. It wasn't even a business account. It was her personal checking account at a credit union 20 miles away. We turned the evidence over to the sheriff's department. 3 days later, detectives showed up at her house with a search warrant. I watched from my porch as they boxed up her home office. Lorraine tried to block the door. One officer gently moved her aside. "You can't do this," she shouted. "I'm the president." "No, ma'am," the lead detective said. "You're not." She was taken in for questioning. Not arrested, not yet, but the investigation was real now. Bank records, mail logs, emails, we had it all, and the community? United like never before. The next neighborhood meeting was held at the church on the edge of town. Over 70 residents packed the room. Curtis showed up in person this time, and when he laid out the case, the room fell silent. Then Joe stood up again. "I lost my wife 3 years ago. She loved this place. I stayed because of her memory, but Lorraine made it hell. You know what this feels like now, like we got a piece of our lives back." Applause broke out. We voted to dissolve the HOA entirely. No more dues. No more fake fines. We replaced it with a voluntary neighborhood council just for emergencies and shared services. No authority, just cooperation. As for Lorraine, she hired a criminal defense attorney. Her son stopped showing up altogether. Last I heard, the DA was reviewing the case for felony fraud charges. And me. I kept the smart lock. But now it opens with a fingerprint scanner, only mine. 2 weeks after the raid on Lorraine's house, Timber Ridge felt like a neighborhood shaking off a long, bitter winter. People were outside again. Kids rode bikes without being told their helmets weren't aesthetically compliant. Wind chimes tinkled from porches, unbothered. Something had shifted. Not just in the rules those were gone, but in the way people looked at each other. Like they'd been let out of a pressure chamber. I was patching the front deck when I saw a sheriff's cruiser pull up. Deputy Arlen stepped out, same guy who'd cuffed Zayden. He walked up with a manila folder under one arm. "Hey Nolan," he said. "Mind if I bend your ear?" I wiped my hands on a rag and gestured to the porch chairs. "You want coffee or just the facts?" he chuckled, sitting down. "Just the facts. We got the bank subpoenas back." "You might want to hear what we found." I sat across from him, the cedar planks between us still warm from the afternoon sun. "She was skimming," he said. "Hard, over $80,000 in deposits from HOA checks into her personal account. Some of it went to landscaping, but most of it. Personal expenses, cosmetics, a trip to Bermuda, school payments for Zayden, it's textbook embezzlement." I leaned back. "You charging her? She's not going quietly. Her lawyers claiming she was just holding the money until the HOA could open a proper account." I raised an eyebrow. "For 8 years. Arlen opened the folder and slid a photo across the table. "This was taken 3 days before we hit her place. Recognize that driveway? It was mine." The image was grainy, taken at night, but it showed a figure in a hoodie and gloves kneeling near my truck. Arlen tapped the timestamp. "Same night your tires got shredded and we lifted a partial print off a roofing nail. Guess whose it matched?" I didn't answer. "Zayden," he said. "We picked him up an hour ago. He's in holding." I kept my expression flat, and she knew. Hard to prove. But we pulled texts off his phone. He told a friend he was fixing Everett's attitude. Might not be enough for conspiracy, but it paints a picture. I stood up, jaw tight. "You need anything from me?" Statement, sure, but also. "There's something else." He pulled out a second photo, this one of a check. It was made out to a company called Pinecrest Property Solutions. Sounds legit, right? Except this company doesn't exist. Lorraine created it. She used it to invoice the HOA for phantom maintenance. "We're talking $5,000 here, $10,000 there, all fake." I exhaled slowly. "You filing charges? District attorney is building a grand jury case, multiple counts. Wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy to defraud, and now obstruction." She tried to delete her emails before we got there. Her IT guy flipped. I nodded. "Good," Arlen stood. "You did right by bringing this forward. Most folks would have just moved." I don't like bullies, I said, even the ones with printed letterheads. He left, and I watched the cruiser disappear down the road before heading inside. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Unknown number. I answered. You think you've won? Lorraine's voice rasped through the line. You've ruined my life, my son's life. You did that yourself, I said calmly. I just turned on the lights. You'll regret this. You're not a hero, Nolan. You're a vindictive troublemaker. You think the neighbors care about you? Wait until they see your true colors. I hung up without replying. That weekend, I attended the first official meeting of the neighborhood council. We held it in a barn that belonged to a retired schoolteacher named June, who'd had her flower beds flagged as unapproved landscaping the year before. She brought lemon bars. People brought folding chairs and clipboards. No one brought fines. I stood quietly in the back until Curtis arrived. He took the floor and laid out the progress. Restitution claims are moving forward, he said. So far, we've documented over $120,000 in unauthorized fines and dues. If the court rules in our favor, everyone who's paid in the past 8 years could get some of it back. A man near the front raised a hand. What about the people who moved out? Can we find them? Curtis nodded. We're trying. If you have contact info, send it to me. Another hand went up. Will she go to prison? That depends on the DA, but the evidence is strong, and if the grand jury indicts her, she's looking at serious time. I noticed a few heads turned toward the door. Zayden had just walked in, hands in his pockets, hoodie down. He didn't look smug anymore. He looked hollow. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, eyes scanning the room like he barely recognized it. Joe stood up from the third row. You here to apologize? He asked, voice even. Zayden shifted. I came to listen, and yeah, I messed up. I thought I was helping her. I didn't know. He stopped. No. That's not true. I did know. I just didn't want to see it. Curtis crossed his arms. You were caught vandalizing someone's truck. I know, Zayden said, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just trying to undo some of it. June's voice cut through the silence. Then help us find the records. The ones she kept in that storage unit. Everyone turned to look at her. She mentioned it once, June said. Said she had the real books off-site. Zayden blinked. Storage unit. Curtis stepped forward. Do you know where it is? Zayden nodded slowly. I think I do. The room buzzed with murmurs. June offered him a chair near the back. He took it. By Monday, we had a warrant. Zayden accompanied the deputies to a storage facility 20 miles down the highway. Inside were 6 metal file cabinets packed with folders. Not just financial records, but correspondence letters Lorraine had written to vendors pretending to be a licensed property manager, fake invoices, and even a rejected application from the county to reinstate the HOA's charter. She'd known it was expired. She just didn't care. Curtis spent the next week buried in documents. What emerged was worse than we imagined. Lorraine had been pocketing funds for years, but she'd also pressured elderly residents into donating to the HOA for future capital improvements. She told them it was optional, but made it clear their compliance would reflect favorably in future reviews. One of those residents had passed away the previous year. His son, a veteran named Marcus, showed up at my cabin the following Friday. She took $5,000 from my dad, he said. Told him it would go toward a community center. He believed her. Always said Lorraine's strict, but she keeps things running. Turns out she was just running off with his money. I invited him to the next meeting. He brought photos, letters, receipts. That was the tipping point. The grand jury indictment came down 2 weeks later, 7 felony counts. Bail was denied. Lorraine was arrested at dawn, no warning, no press conference. One neighbor saw her being led out in slippers, hands cuffed behind her back. Zayden testified before the grand jury. He admitted to trespassing, vandalism, and fabricating the emergency call. In exchange for his cooperation and the information about the storage unit, the charges were reduced. He was sentenced to community service and mandatory counseling. At the next neighborhood gathering, someone handed me a plaque. Homemade wood burned with the words, "For turning the lock that opened the truth." I didn't want it. I gave it to Marcus. My dad would have liked this, he said. He always said justice takes time, but it always comes. And for the first time since I bought the cabin, Timber Ridge felt like the place I'd hoped it would be. Not perfect, but honest. And finally, free. The morning after Lorraine's arrest, I found a note wedged under my windshield wiper. No envelope, just a torn scrap of printer paper folded once. I opened it slowly, expecting another half-baked threat or some leftover spite from one of her loyalists. Instead, it read in shaky handwriting, "Thank you for standing up. I didn't know who else to call. No name, no address, just that." Whatever Lorraine had built over the years, it wasn't just a fraud, it was fear. People were finally realizing they didn't have to keep their heads down anymore, but there was still one piece of the puzzle that hadn't fit: the missing funds. The court filings confirmed over $80,000 had been funneled through Lorraine's personal account. But when Curtis and the restitution committee tallied up the fake invoices, fines, and donations, the total came out significantly higher, closer to $130,000. "So where's the gap?" I asked, pacing beside Curtis in the church basement after the third restitution planning session. He tapped a manila folder with his finger. "We think she was laundering it through another party. There's a series of withdrawals made at the same ATM over 18 months, cash only, always just under the federal reporting threshold. Someone was helping her move it." I stopped pacing. "Who?" Curtis opened the folder and slid a photo across the table. "Recognize him?" I stared at the grainy image. It was taken from a security camera above a gas station ATM. The man wore a baseball cap and sunglasses, but I knew those shoulders, that build, that posture. It was Bruce Wilburn, former HOA board member, ex-military, and the guy who used to hand out laminated violation notices like candy on Halloween. He'd resigned from the board 6 months before Lorraine's fake re-election, citing family health issues. No one had seen much of him since. "Where's he been?" I asked. Curtis picked up his phone. "That's what we're about to find out." What followed was a week of digging. We learned Bruce had quietly moved out of Timber Ridge and into a cabin on the far side of the valley, technically outside HOA jurisdiction. He didn't sell his house, just left it sitting vacant. The utilities were still in his name, but everything else was silent. I drove out there with Marcus and June on a damp Tuesday morning. The gravel road to Bruce's cabin was half flooded from the recent rain, and the mailbox was stuffed with weeks-old circulars. His truck was parked under the carport, covered in pine needles. I knocked. Nothing. June stepped up beside me. "Try again." I knocked louder. This time the door creaked open an inch. Bruce stood there in stained flannel, a pistol holstered at his hip. His eyes were bloodshot, like he hadn't slept in days. "You need to leave," he said, voice low. "You've got about 6 seconds to explain why your face is on ATM footage tied to a fraud case," I replied. "Or we go straight to the sheriff." He didn't shut the door. He didn't invite us in either, just stared between us, weighing something. Finally, he exhaled. "I didn't know at first. She told me it was reimbursement for landscaping. Said she needed help pulling cash so the vendors wouldn't charge extra for card payments. I was retired, bored." I said, "Sure." Marcus stepped forward. "But you kept doing it." Bruce looked at the floor. "Because I figured it out. About 3 months in, started asking questions. That's when she made it clear if I stopped, she'd tell the VA I was unstable, said she'd ruin my pension." "You let her blackmail you?" June's voice cracked with disbelief. Bruce nodded once. "I didn't have proof. She never sent messages. Only talked in person. I kept quiet, but when I heard she got arrested, I figured it was over." Curtis arranged a meeting with the sheriff that afternoon. Bruce turned himself involuntarily, handed over every bank statement, every withdrawal receipt. He didn't ask for a deal, just said he was ready to make it right. The DA added him to the case as a cooperating witness. His testimony filled the missing gaps, and with it, the total scope of Lorraine's scheme became undeniable. She had used HOA funds to buy silence, loyalty, and at least once a round of legal intimidation against a homeowner fighting a property line dispute. That lawsuit had buried the man in fees until he sold his house and moved out of state. That wasn't just civil fraud. That was criminal coercion. The grand jury reconvened. 3 more charges were added to Lorraine's indictment: witness intimidation, conspiracy to defraud, and tampering with legal proceedings. The trial was scheduled for early spring. In the meantime, the community pressed forward. The restitution committee had recovered over $100,000 in fraudulent funds, most of which were frozen in Lorraine's accounts. Curtis coordinated with the court to distribute it proportionally to those who had been fined, overcharged, or misled. Not everyone got back what they lost. Some, like Marcus's father, were gone. Others had moved away and never responded to contact attempts. But what mattered was that the bleeding had stopped. The final neighborhood meeting came on a warm Sunday evening. We held it not in a church or someone's barn, but right in the center of Timber Ridge on the old tennis court Lorraine had once deemed unsuitable for gatherings. Folding chairs lined the cracked court surface. Kids ran along the net. Someone fired up a grill. Joe stood up near the edge of the crowd, holding a clipboard. "We've got the court's approval to dissolve all HOA-related liens filed under Lorraine's leadership. Title clouds are being cleared. Your homes are yours again." Applause rippled through the chairs. He nodded toward me. "And we've voted. Nolan's been unanimously elected to lead the new Timber Ridge Advisory Council. Just one rule: no fines, no dues, no drama." Laughter broke out. I stood a little stunned. "Thanks, but I'm not a politician." June called from the back. "Nobody wants one." "That's the point." Later, as the sun dipped behind the pines, I walked back to my cabin. The gate clicked behind me, the smart lock lighting up with a soft green glow. I paused just past it, listening. No helicopters, no arguments, no threats. A quiet breeze filtered through the trees. For the first time in a long while, it actually felt like mine. The next week, Lorraine's trial began. It lasted 9 days. Bruce testified. So did Zayden. So did 5 homeowners who had been directly targeted by her schemes. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 7 years in state prison, with parole eligibility after 4. The judge ordered full restitution and barred her from managing or participating in any housing association for life. As for Zayden, he completed his community service at a local animal shelter. I heard from June that he'd applied to a technical college in the city. Quietly, without fanfare, I never spoke to Lorraine again. Didn't need to. Timber Ridge moved on. No dues, no threats, just neighbors. And a smart lock on one cabin pool that reminded everyone how it all started with a gate, a lie, and someone finally saying no.